having authority, and I don't mean like authority in a bad way, but you have to be followable to get people. It doesn't matter what you're selling. You have to be confident. You have to be assertive. You have to be a followable person for them to trust you and purchase from. Back to what we were just saying, like if you know the structure really well, you're always going to be ahead in the conversation. And then you know what objections are going to come. You can pre-handle them. And I think that's why you have to do structure and questions first, because I see so many scripts that people will ask a question. They think it's a really good question. And I'm like, man, you could answer that 20 different ways. So the way I like to build the buyer, if you will, and control the conversation while still moving it forward is like if they say something like that after I ask them why is life insurance important to you, they tell me that. I say, you know what, I love talking to people like you. You just sound like the kind of mom who your kids have like always been the most important thing to you.
Welcome to Final Expense Telesales. My name is Dana Neeson, and I have a special guest for you today, another member of 7th level NEPQ, actually someone I've been following for a couple of years now, before he was even with 7th level. Started just as a life insurance agent, just like us. So everybody welcome Cayden Sanchez.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yes, I started in the coaching program with 7th level. I was just a client and I did well, and then they brought me on to coach with them. So it all worked out.
So when did you get your life insurance license?
2020. Well, I got it right at the end of 2019, started in insurance January of 2020, right before COVID.
Okay. So you're about 10 months ahead of me in this space. I got my license in October of 2020
Yep.
when I was looking to make a shift. Okay, so you started in 2020 and you started with an IMO, I assume.
Yes,
Did-
started with an IMO. The one I started with was, uh, one of the one I won't say the name, but one of the
Okay.
ones where you worked your warm market, talk to your friends and family, theoretically sell them, recruit them, grow from there. I was very young, and I've also like as a kid, I was always telling people that I wanted to be wealthy when I grew up. And so when I came around to my friends and family and tried to sell them things, that did not go well.
Wait, you were very young? You are still very young. How can I
Yeah,
ask?
I am still young. Yeah, I'm 30.
You're,
Uh,
wow.
yes.
Okay. But then yes, you started in your 20s.
Yep.
Which I think is the about the age that a lot of people are getting into life insurance right now, as it's becoming less like our like the old man in a tie and a briefcase, and more people like us, right?
Yes.
Making life insurance cool again. We need hats that say that.
Exactly. The virtual world has changed everything.
Absolutely. Okay, so timeline, you get your license in the beginning of 2020, you start with an IMO. At what point did you realize I'm probably need some help learning how to sell this?
I think I figured that out probably like uh at first I was leaning into the IMO, as they recommend to do, and it just wasn't working. And so it was probably like 8 or 9 months later, I just was like, oh, this is not working. I need to find some sort of training and started going down that rabbit hole. Started with other people, actually. I went to, the traditional smash closers trainings, if you know what I mean. And luckily, through them, stumbled upon Jeremy. Jeremy didn't even have Instagram at the time that I found Jeremy. It was before he even started his Instagram or anything like that. He was a guest speaker on one of the other trainings that I was a part of.
Oh, wow.
And when I saw him speak, I came from a hospital background. So like before insurance, I worked in the local hospital here in Utah. Really enjoyed it. I actually loved that job. I just was never going to make enough money doing it, but I loved it.
Mhm.
And so when I saw Jeremy, he's talking all about how it's based on science, based on persuasion and neuroscience, and I was like, okay, this is my guy. I found somebody who's science based and got into the training. I think I signed up for Jeremy's training January of 21, so exactly a year later.
Okay. And so that must be right when he got on Instagram, because you were one of the first interviews I saw And when I started following him on Instagram, he only had a couple thousand followers.
Yeah,
What does he have now? Like almost 500,000?
I think he's got more than 500,000. He's coming up on 1 million. He's getting there.
So you guys know that I'm a huge promoter of NEPQ. If I wasn't so passionate about my team and what we do, I would be with you guys already. I'm definitely a stan. So anytime I get the opportunity to bring you guys on and to try to promote it for agents to really take that ownership of themselves, I love it, and I follow you, and I really respect you and everything that you're doing. So you did NEPQ, you got the training, and then did you go apply it at your IMO? And what
Yeah.
happened?
Um, I'm kind of a slow learner, and sales was something that did not come naturally to me at all. I grew up in a family where like I'm the only male that's not blue collar, the only one. Um,
Okay.
and so like sales was not my forte. For anybody who's like grown up in a blue collar family, very direct, not very sales like. And so
Yeah.
sales didn't come very naturally to me. It took me about 4 months. And that's when I really started to like, I started seeing the results from NEPQ right away, but that's when I started to like see results that I didn't think were possible before.
Mhm.
And that's when the bank account started to climb, stress started to kind of relieve, those sorts of things.
And at what point did you decide that you wanted to leave the IMO and then just go see if you can work for seventh level?
Mm. It wasn't even so much that I wanted to leave the IMO.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
with seventh level, what kind of happened is I was doing well. And then we started chatting and they just brought me on as a skills coach. So they actually still wanted me to stay within the IMO and keep selling so that
Hmm.
because things change.
Yeah.
you know like even now we both got our license in 2020.
Yeah.
Like selling is different now than it was in 2020. Like it changes fairly rapidly, so they wanted me to keep selling and coaching at the same time. So it was never like I had to give up selling to go and coach with seventh level.
So are you still selling life insurance today?
Yeah.
And what type of life insurance do you sell, and where are you at with that now in your journey?
Yeah, I feel like I've sold every type of life insurance. I've gone through, we have to test different things. And like you said, I'm young, so like, the shiny object syndrome definitely got me. And I've
Yeah.
sold a few different things, but landed on final expense.
Good. Okay. Well, this is great because this is a final expense insurance platform here.
Exactly.
I know that you did sell IULs for a while and mortgage protection, and that
Yep.
I feel is what when I go to social media and I look to see what people are talking about, I feel like everybody is selling IULs and mortgage protection, and you got away from it. So why?
With mortgage protection, I think mortgage protection's good. But I think the important thing to understand is mortgage protection is just a marketing term.
Yes, it is. I agree.
It's not, you're still selling final expense like 70% of the time.
Mm.
Except for the marketing is mortgage protection, so it makes it far harder to sell the final expense because they're expecting to cover the whole mortgage. But I don't have an issue with mortgage protection. I think, it's just about how you want to generate your leads.
Hmm.
Um, and right now with interest rates being higher, mortgage protection is a little bit harder. All these things kind of correlate. And
Yes.
so with mortgage protection, I just think there are better ways to generate leads. But I think that's a marketing issue versus anything else. With
Okay.
IULs, I enjoy IULs. I think they're a fantastic product, and I did well selling them. But I don't like selling them because IULs, they're a great vehicle to grow your money in. If you're in insurance, I think a lot of people can agree on that they're a great vehicle to grow your money in, but they have to be used properly, right? Like we've all seen the stories online about IULs, and if they're not set up properly, you end up
Yes.
really hurting people. And so I always set the IULs up well. I was always very big on that. And what I started to realize was like the more of them I sold, I felt like I was handing the keys to a Ferrari to like a brand new driver, a 16-year-old. And it's
Mhm.
like, and I guess what I mean by that is like they're a great vehicle, but you have to know how to use them. And most people are not going to figure out how to use them in that hour sales call, right? They can understand them well enough to move forward and start the IUL and grow their money. But in terms of actually leveraging the IUL, there has to be, in my humble opinion, uh, more customer service after the fact. And so I really have an odd relationship with IULs because I think they are fantastic. I think they are great for people, but I don't believe that insurance agents should be able to sell IULs. I think you should have to have a securities license, personally.
We talked about this a little bit off
Yeah,
recording, and I agree with what you said because most life insurance agents are salespeople, and
yeah,
most salespeople sell for today.
yeah,
And to to think that a life insurance agent is going to have that mentality to follow up on their book of business in a strategy way, I mean maybe I'm living in a world with where the glass is half empty. I just don't think people are going to do that. I think they're just
yeah.
sell and move on to the next.
Some of them will, but the majority will not.
Right. Yeah. So
And
that's interesting. So you landed on final expense, which obviously I love. That is my wheelhouse. I think final expense insurance is never going anywhere. It can't be affected significantly by the market. In fact, during COVID, we sold more life
yep,
insurance. And right, what is it? 65,000, no, 10,000 people a day are turning 65. Everybody's going to die. And the majority of people in this country have not put themselves or their family in a position where if something were to happen to them, they wouldn't have to do a GoFundMe, a car wash, a bake sale, all the things that we know people are doing. And so it's a product that people need. They
yep,
really need it. And so I'm happy to hear that you landed there. So let's get into what you're seeing. Now, I know that you're also building a team
yep.
selling final expense insurance, and the type of people that you're taking are have experience
Yeah,
or
mainly experienced agents. Sometimes if they have experience outside of insurance, but in sales, sometimes still those people, but mainly experienced people.
okay, so then let's talk about the people that you're coaching
Yeah,
in NEPQ in seventh level that are final expense agents or want to be final expense agents that don't have the type of sales experience that compared to the people that you're bringing on your team. I'm really curious to know what are some of the things that you see when you're coaching people who have made the decision to invest in a coaching program
yeah.
that is still a barrier to success for them.
I could go on all day about this. I'm pretty
Oh,
sure we could
I
be here
mean,
for
I'm
hours.
dying to know because I feel like this is such an important topic for why people aren't successful.
I think the biggest thing why people aren't successful is because it's in their head. They don't trust themselves and they feel awkward talking to people. And like the thing about the human brain is that having authority, and I don't mean like authority in a bad way, but you have to be followable to get people. It doesn't matter what you're selling. You have to be confident. You have to be assertive. You have to be a followable person for them to trust you and purchase from you. And a lot of people get into it and they think, oh, I'm going to figure out this like one little word track and that's going to work. And
Right.
it's like, no, if you don't believe in yourself, then why is anybody else going to believe in you? And sometimes it's more than sales, like kind of like when Jordan Peterson talks about cleaning your room. Like
Uh-huh.
like that stuff leaks out. If you're trying to be this perfect person on the phone and you're telling somebody, "Hey, I'm going to take care of you forever," but you can't even do your bed. Like, are you really saying that with conviction? Probably not. And so I think in terms of just like the number one thing that I see, obviously there's a lot more that can be unpacked from that, but we're in a generation where we don't have to talk to people. And so some people are just not very good at just talking to the person on the other side of the phone. They talk to them like a prospect. And fun fact, all of your prospects are people.
That is a fun fact. Now, what about though people who are not raised in this generation of technology? Because I have people on my team that are my age. I'm
Yep.
44, in their 50s, 60s, 70s, beyond
Yep.
that did grow up talking to people that also struggle with
Yeah.
with sales. And so what I found, and you tell me if you see this too, is those people are really stuck on the old way of selling, as opposed to like they can have a conversation with someone, but they love to hear themselves talk.
Yes.
Do you see that
I
from
do see that a lot.
you
And
do?
so and so people would kind of get over that first step. But you have to have a structure. Like a structure makes the whole conversation. You want to talk to people, but if you're not doing it in a structured way, it's very hard to duplicate.
Yes.
And so you might even see some success. I see this happen all the time, where you might see some success early, but then it starts to fall off
Why?
because you start to realize that you don't know what you're doing. And if you don't have a structure, it's also like you might have gotten lucky
Hmm.
and you might have had some success, but how the hell do you duplicate it if you don't have a structure? And and kind of coming, like I said, this is why I love Jeremy, is if
Yeah.
you come back to like the neuroscience of the brain, and I'm no expert on it. I'm not claiming to be an expert on the brain, but based on what I know, um, the brain and the way it makes decisions is it's very, very interesting. And if our conversation isn't structured, then the conversation is just like an emotional roller coaster for the other person.
Hmm.
And that creates indecision.
Hmm. Mm. Okay. Yes. I like the way that you just said that.
Yeah, because it's like you're just like talking. It's kind of like, hey, let's go swimming. And then it's like, okay, like we go to the ocean. All right, let's meet at the ocean.
I kind of also think about not having a structured conversation. And maybe you know this because you have younger kids. Do you have more than one? Kids, plural?
Yes,
Okay.
we have
You know
three.
those books, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie?
Yep.
So I always, if you don't know what those books are, look it up. But essentially, it's about a mouse who wants a cookie and then thinks that he wants milk to go with it, and then that leads to something else, and that leads to something else, and then 5 minutes into it, you forgot what your objective was in the first place. And I almost think that unstructured conversations are very similar to just creating ADD and like what you just said, indecision.
Yep.
Um, so I also find that people have success early on when following a structure, and then they get away from it because they get very comfortable. And that's also when I see people start to,
Yep.
because they think they got it. Like,
Yep.
do you ever get it, or what do you see when it comes to that when you're doing call reviews?
I think there probably is a version of you get it, but there's always another level. You know,
Sure.
like I'm always I've been there so many times where I'm like, oh, I think I got it now. And then, you learn something new and it's like, whoa, uh, I'm an amateur.
Yes.
And so there's so many different levels to it, but I definitely do see that where, they'll start following a structure and they think they're building a really big gap. Obviously Jeremy talks about the gap all the time.
Yes. Yes.
But the thing is like people are coming in with a pre-built gap.
Uh-huh.
Like the marketing has already built a gap. That's why they're a lead.
Right.
And so people think that they're doing really well because the prospect might be telling them things, but it's just like you might just be talking to somebody who's a very open person. And like anything that's right at the tip of their tongue isn't actually that valuable. Like if they didn't have to think about the answer and they just spew it out, you didn't build that gap. That
That's
gap
so
was
good.
already there. And so like even though you have a gap, if you don't stretch it, there's no urgency.
Yes.
And then they
So
want to think
I
about it.
think an example of that is when someone who's open says, I need insurance to take care of my funeral because I don't want my kids to have to pay for it. I think a lot of agents are like, perfect, I have a deal,
Yep.
right?
Here's the
And
quote.
that's a lay down. And then they get to the end and it's like, well, I want to think about it. I want to talk to my kids. And they get so surprised that they get the objection because they didn't do the work in the beginning. So when you say building the gap, If you get someone that says, I need insurance to take care of my burial, I don't want to leave it to my kids, what are some questions that agents should be asking to actually build that gap?
I think it's really important to understand like the fundamentals of the human brain. Um, and I hate to keep coming back to that, but I'm going to continue to,
Okay.
whether you like it or not. So just like kind of taking a step backwards, like our brains really haven't changed over the last like 1,000 years. Like like our advancements have continued to build on each other, but the way our human brain works is still relatively similar to how it was before,
Okay.
right? And obviously the world was a lot different then,
Yes.
right? But we have that mammalian part of our brain, the fight or flight mode, whatever you want to call it, the lizard part of your brain. There's so many different terms for it.
Okay.
But that part of the brain is constantly evaluating things. And so kind of the point I'm making is you have to recognize how that part of the brain makes decisions and evaluates things because that part of the brain is always going. And that's the part of the brain that you have to communicate to. And so within that, if you understand that, coming back 500 years ago, people, operated in much smaller groups than what we do now. And if you didn't respect authority, you got your hand cut off.
Yes.
So authority is very, very important for making the sale, right? And so you have to be confident and assertive, kind of like I was talking about before, but it also comes into your questions. Like the questions you're asking will build that authority.
And
So I
how
think
you,
that's exactly, and how you ask them,
yeah.
right? And so like that's number one to think about. But number two, outside of the authority piece, which is a massive driver in them just being suggestible and open to your suggestions, is identity. Identity, like as people, we all have this way that we view ourselves, and we want to remain congruent to that. And so the way I like to build the buyer, if you will, and control the conversation, while still moving it forward, is like if they say something like that after I ask them why is life insurance important to you, they tell me that. I say, you know what, I love talking to people like you. You just sound like the kind of mom who your kids have like always been the most important thing to you. And you would probably do absolutely anything for them. And like it's just really cool to be talking to somebody who's like as selfless as you and that you're thinking about life insurance, because I just talk to so many people and everybody loves their kids, but there's so many people out there that, they're like, hey, I paid for everything when you were a kid. Now that I'm older, you cover things. That's your responsibility. You know what I mean? And so it's not a question, it's a statement,
Hmm. Hmm.
but you'll like it's shocking what people will say after that.
What do you get? What are some things that you get?
Oh, I could never do that to my kids. When my brother actually, when he passed away, he didn't have anything and like he wasn't that close with his kids and it was so hard for them. And I just could never ever do that to my kids. And like that is far more I don't even want to use the word heavy, but it's far more aligned with their actual decision-making process that they want to follow.
Right.
Because I think the way I view sales is that our job is to help people get out of their own way. Because
Right.
most of us have like we both have kids. If you ask anybody that has kids, what's the biggest priority in your life? They say their kids.
Yes.
But then you look at the decisions they make throughout the day, the way they spend their time, the things they do, and usually that does not line up with their kids being their top priority, even though they
Hmm.
think it is. And so the way I view sales is that all we're doing is getting people out of their own way and getting them out of like the busyness of day-to-day life and allowing them to like make the decision based on their core identity that they actually view as the most important and how they want to make decisions.
So when you when you get someone to the core of where they make decisions and get them to really feel that emotional urgency to want to make a change, Is it easier? Is it harder? Or is it just another part of your process when at the end that same person says, well, I want to talk to my kids about it first?
A lot easier. It's significantly easier because nobody else is going to get them to that core.
Hmm.
And so when you're the person that's done that, they don't really know why, but you have a special connection with them where they just trust you. And so because you have so much more trust, it becomes 1,000 times easier to handle objections because they actually are listening to what you say and they value your opinion. You have the authority, right? You've
Going
earned
back,
it.
yeah, the beginning of what you said.
Yeah, and so like it's not that objections don't come up, but you have so much more connection with that person that they're much more open to listening to you and they're far more suggestible.
And it actually becomes just a normal part of the call. It's not anything you should get anxiety from.
No.
It honestly shouldn't be something, even though we talk a lot about objection prevention, it's not objection avoidance because you're still going to get objections. And I would love to, do you try to help people figure out a way to embrace the objections when you get them? Because they're going to happen. You're going to get
Yep.
objections. And instead of freezing up and tensing up and trying to find your script and what am I supposed to say? How do you get people through that mental block of just welcoming them and making it just another part of the sales process?
I think that getting past that mental block is it's a fairly complex thing to actually do, and it takes some repetition. Like it's uncomfortable. You just have to push through it in the beginning. It is what it is. It's going to be uncomfortable the first couple times. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but for me, like the way I make it easier is we just treat all objections the same. Like it really doesn't matter what they say. It's always
Uh-huh.
about the money.
Yes.
If
I
it
agree.
if it was free, they would do it.
Right.
It is always, it doesn't matter if they want to pray about it, they want to talk to their dog, they want to walk the cat. I don't know, right? It's always about the money.
It is.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
always.
So we always go there first. Um, it doesn't really matter the objection. We just acknowledge it and let them know that we understand. I think that's a really important piece of objection handling that a lot of people miss is like if the person doesn't feel like you understand where they're coming from, they're never going to listen.
Right.
It's kind of like if you just walk up and you start talking to somebody and then they just start giving you solutions to something you were talking about and you're like, yeah, that's not going to work. Yeah, it's not going to work. And then you
Right.
walk away and you're like, wow, that person was an asshole. Um,
So, what are your thoughts on? I want to think about it. Oh, you'll have plenty of time to think about it. We don't even know if you're approved yet. Life insurance isn't something you can buy. You have to get approved for it first. What are what are your thoughts on that?
thoughts on that? My
Yes.
first one is that people are not dumb.
Yeah.
And they most of the time they're going to see through that. My other thought is if you're going to do that, I think I do think there is some value to it. I don't think that you necessarily shouldn't have that in your arsenal,
Hmm.
but if you're going to do that, that person's not sold. And you better be prepared to follow up like 4 or 5 more times.
Hmm. I want to talk about that since you brought that up. We'll talk about follow-ups in a second. But what I find is that that tends to be most people's go-to
Yeah, it's
because
easy.
it's easy, it's where they feel the most comfortable. They don't have to go deeper or again go back to reminding them of the gap that they created. I don't have
Yep,
a problem with it either, as long as they've already gone through the process
exactly.
of reminding them or helping them remind themselves why
Yep,
they wanted it in the first place. What was it about it that they liked? Do they even want to have it? And
yep,
then going back to the price and seeing if we can maybe make a recommendation to lower it. And then if you still get resistance, for me, that objection handling sequence is like a Hail Mary. Like if all else
yep.
fails, just throw it out there. But I do not think it should be the first thing that you say. Um,
100% agreed. I think you have to, um, it doesn't really matter what sales training you take. They all say isolate the objection.
right.
Uh, just do the basics. Do the basics extremely well and you'll be fine. So like if somebody says that they need to think about it, for me, I'm immediately going to say, hey, that's no problem at all. Completely understand. And I guess just to make sure like we're on the same page, like the policy itself, like let's say it was free, does it cover everything that you want it to?
Yes.
Okay, what like why this one though versus like getting more or less?
Because it will give my kids the money they need to cremate me and give them a little bit extra.
Okay, perfect. Now that makes sense based on what you've told me about your kids and how important they are to you. So I guess when like you say you want to think about it, is it more so that like you were expecting it to be a little bit less and so you have to like go and check the budget, or is it more so that like you're like thinking, oh, maybe I should look at different options?
Yeah, I have to check my budget.
Okay. What were you expecting it was going to be?
Well, I really can't afford anything more than $50 a month. So,
Okay, so that's kind of what you were planning on is like, okay, like I'll do $50 a month and see how much that gets me.
yeah, how much would that get me?
I can pull it up here and double check and we can see that with the $50 a month, that probably would be enough to cover the cremation. It just might not leave, extra to your kids. It kind of depends. How important is that part to you to leave some extra?
I mean, it's kind of a nice to have type thing, but what's the most important is that I don't want them to have to come out of pocket.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, you don't want to burden them with the cremation expenses,
Yeah,
is the biggest thing. You don't really want it to impact their life and that sort of thing. And if they have extra, great, but if they don't, it's okay.
right.
Okay, I'm with you. Now I'll pull it up and see how much like the 50 would get us. Um, and I guess like if we were able to get it down to 50, would you want to move forward at that point?
Yeah, I think I could do that.
Okay, perfect. I would just move forward if it were me.
Perfect. So you literally asked me three clarifying questions about making sure that was the only thing that was holding me up and getting me to kind of like pre-commit before you even gave me the coverage amount. And I thought that was brilliant. So please rewind and rewatch that. That was perfect.
Yeah,
Be-
all it is, isolate the money objection, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, if it was free, does this cover everything you want to? Yes, get them to anchor into that more. You're basically going to ask why, but
Mhm.
generally you're not going to say why because why is kind of a word that can sometimes cause resistance. So you're
Yeah.
usually going to reword that. And then after that, all I'm doing is I'm giving them a binary question. Okay, is it this or is it this? Because I know it's one of those two.
Right.
It was either more than you were expecting or you want to shop around. Like I've sold enough insurance to recognize that like 99.9% of the time it's one of those two. And
Yeah.
they'll tell you. They're totally fine to tell you.
And it's like if you were selling a car and so, and you got, and I want to think about an objection as a car salesman, would you say, well, I don't even know if I can sell you this car. We got to see if you get qualified from the bank first. So I don't even know what you'd have to think about if we don't put it in. It's like, it just seems so silly to me. Why do we do
Yeah.
it in life insurance? But we, like, so if we get anything out of this, just that has to be that is a Hail Mary objection, but it seems to be what everybody goes to first. And I'm so glad you just validated that because it was just such a logical way to take me out of my resistance and get me back into why I wanted it and help me solve the problem. And that's all we're doing. And it's really not that hard. And I don't feel like it was not uncomfortable. What's uncomfortable is telling me I can't have something unless I
Yeah.
get proof for it first. That's what's actually uncomfortable.
Super uncomfortable. If
So
you
why
think
do we do
about
it? It's like,
it's
go
easy. It's
or
because it's a one-liner word track. And one-liner word tracks are very easy for, like an IMO or, somebody training to just say, "Hey, say this."
hmm. And so they don't know better. But when they do know better, I still feel like we get resistance because it's not easy. And so the ones that are successful in life insurance do the things that aren't easy and they do
Yep.
it over and over and over again until it becomes easier. And it's not like it necessarily becomes super easy and comfortable for people that are successful. It's that they just made the decision that this is the route I'm going to go because statistically it's going to get me more sales. It's going to allow me to
Yep.
help more families.
Well, and it's going to help them too. Like,
Yes.
yes, it helps you, but like, that person, if you've been in insurance for more than a few months, you probably have had somebody that told you they wanted to think about it. And then a couple weeks later, their spouse is calling saying, I hope they did it. And they didn't do it.
Hmm.
And so like, I think that I actually think that's another thing that agents mess up is they're so worried about themselves. And it's like your intent bleeds through. If you're worried about yourself and you're not worried about them, they're going to know. And they might not know that it's that, right? But they're going to pick up on something's off. It's kind of, you can, we all have those senses within us. You have a conversation with somebody and it's like, they seem like a really good person, but something's off. Like, what are they hiding? Like, I don't get it. Right. And it's just like, that's that kind of coming back like full circle now,
Yes.
coming back to that mammalian part of the brain. It's always working. And it's your subconscious is communicating to their subconscious all the time. You can't control it. It is just happening. And if you're worried about you making the sale more than helping them, you'll still make sales. I'm not saying you're not going to make sales,
Yeah.
but there's going to be a barrier. Like some people are going to be better at reading that than others.
I also see a direct correlation between selling for the better outcome of your client versus the better outcome of yourself when it comes to the C word that everybody hates in this business, chargebacks.
Yes.
And we're definitely not in this business to just borrow money and have a big payday loan. We want
Yep.
to sell policies that stick. And if you can commit to selling in a way that does benefit the customer more than yourself, you'll have far less people that cancel on you. And so
Yep. And
talk
probably more referrals.
about chargebacks, yeah, and more referrals. Do you see a difference in chargebacks depending on how
Yep.
you sell? So what have you seen?
Yeah, 100% there's a difference. Because if you just go through the conversation very logically and you don't like get to the core of the emotion and why they want it, you've commoditized yourself.
Mhm.
And we all know that other people are going to call.
Yes.
And it's only a matter of time before somebody calls that's good on the phone and helps them realize that you didn't put them in the best product.
Right.
And so, I think that when you actually get to the core of it and you build more of a relationship with the person because you're getting to the core reason why they want to do it and reminding them of that and probably reminding them of reasons that they didn't even know,
Hmm.
ideally, right? They hold you up on such a pedestal that they won't replace you, even if it is cheaper. Like, because price isn't everything,
Right.
especially for that generation. Like for the final, everybody thinks that they're just like, oh, that person's cheap, that person's cheap. It's like, no, that person will pay more if the value is there. You just didn't present the value.
Which is why I've always said brokers get the same objections as everybody else, including us who only represent one carrier, which is I want to shop around. Why would you shop around? I have access to 20 carriers, right? Because it's not about the price. It's about you didn't help them get out of their own way to make a decision. And so, speaking of, it's not always about price. What would you say to all the agents that salivate when they say, I can't wait to come across someone with a Lincoln Heritage policy?
Still that did it logically.
Yeah.
Um, because to be clear, I've never worked for Lincoln Heritage. I'm not going to. But you guys have a fantastic product. And what you do after the person passes away, and that I don't remember what that program's called, but that program to help them plan the funeral and do all of that and save them money, that is such a big value add.
It is.
And if they talk to somebody that got them to the core of why they wanted it and built a good connection with that person, and you have that value, um, you can't replace that.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously feel very strongly and passionate about it. It's called the Funeral Consumer Guardian Society. And it Lincoln Heritage is definitely a little bit more expensive compared to some of the other plans, especially when we go into modified policies. There is definitely a bigger gap in price.
Is it more expensive though? Because like it's going to save them money on the back end.
It is. It is. But the thing too is I don't necessarily think everybody who needs final expense insurance is a fit for the Lincoln Heritage product.
Yep.
Or a number. So, like, I'm not trying to force our product down someone's throat. I'm not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. We're doing like a qualification or a disqualification in our discovery to find
Yep.
out if what we do can provide value for them. Is this something that would help their family? Do they even have family that they want to protect? Right? Because there's sometimes people that are like, I don't have family. I just have a buddy that said he'd take care of my cremation and like price is the most important thing. And those people aren't necessarily going to find value in what we have to offer, nor do they want
Yep.
to pay more for it. So,
Yep.
but there's enough opportunity out there for everybody to find what makes the most sense to them. And I'm totally fine with that. Like, I don't think that everybody needs to buy Lincoln Heritage. And it's just because
I
that's
think
all.
that's a good point. I think like that right there is massive that there's enough opportunity out there for everybody. Like, why are we acting like one product is the one end all be all for all people? Why are we acting like one IMO is the best one ever? It's like, it depends. And it depends so much on their situation. Like, what are we talking about?
The other thing too that kind of drives me crazy, and you can speak to this too, because I don't have any experience outside of Lincoln. Okay, so this is
Yep.
coming from just outside perspective, which is people are saying, well, I'm not putting people in the best position because I only have one carrier, yet you're contracted with 20 carriers, but yet you only sell three
Yeah.
because you're the most comfortable with them. They give you the best bonuses. And right, there's all these other incentives that push them towards these specific carriers. So you're no different than me,
Yep. Agreed. 100%.
right?
I've been on the broker side with a couple of different companies, and they all have the certain carriers that they push really hard. And if you do not sell those carriers, they do not like it.
And who is calling the kettle black now?
Yeah. 1000% agreed. And I'm
So,
somebody who's been with, I've been captive. I've been with five IMOs. I've
oh, wow.
jumped around. Yeah. Yeah. So I've been broker, I've been captive. Uh, I think there's a value in both.
Now, Lincoln Heritage, to be clear, is not captive, by the way.
Oh,
So
really?
you can be yes, it's just my team because we provide free leads. You can't be contracted with other carriers because obviously we're giving free leads.
Yep.
But Lincoln Heritage is not captive. So you can be a broker. If I was a broker, I would do everything I could to try to have Lincoln Heritage as one of my carriers so that when I found that where it's like the family is the most important thing to them to make sure they're protected and there's no money there and I know what I know, I would try to offer Lincoln Heritage as often as I could. And if I had to come down in price for whatever reason in order to help them, maybe look at something comparable and if they're okay sacrificing that. So you should look into that as getting them as one of your people that you can offer.
Let's have a conversation about that. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, I can't help you with it, but it is important for you to know that they're not captive.
It's good to know. I had no idea.
Yeah. Yep. So, okay. Well, anything else that you would like to offer as far as like sales strategies, anything that you think that someone can really tangibly take away from this and apply right now? I would love to. I mean, we've already given them so much, but one last thing.
Last thing. Um, oh, there's so many things that we could go over. One last thing. I think one last thing is um, appreciate the journey.
Hmm.
You know, like find fun in the work. You know, even if you're struggling right now, the way I've always looked at insurance, and I've seen a lot of different industries being with seventh level, like so many, because I've been with seventh level for quite a while now.
Hmm.
And I've looked at insurance as kind of like it's a place where generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, it's hard to get the ball rolling compared to other industries. But once the ball is rolling, it's almost impossible to stop. Whereas other industries, usually you never stop pushing the ball.
Mm,
But insurance, once the ball is going, it's like an avalanche.
it's true.
Like you could try and quit, and people are still going to call you for referrals. Like you're stuck, you know?
Yeah.
And so I guess the piece that I'd leave with is like keep going, keep finding more resources like Dana. You know, there's a lot of really good people out there that are giving people advice, and find somebody who you really click with that you feel like is going to be a good mentor. That's more important than the company,
Mm,
and latch onto that person and follow them. Do it their way. I think the big mistake that I'm going to end it on this actually,
okay.
because this brought a thought. And it's what I attribute a lot of my success to is a lot of people come into different places and they immediately want to do it their own way. I'm sure you have this all the time where you
Yes.
hire somebody, they look at your script, and then you talk to them a day later and they're like, oh yeah, I'm just like rewording it to sound more like me. Um,
Yes. Wait, were you literally in my meeting last week?
and it's like, okay, that's nice. Have you ever sold insurance? And even if you have, um, you know, I think that when you start somewhere new, put your ego aside and just do it their way.
Right.
Just shut up, do it their way. I have this rule, and the time frame isn't always the same, but anytime I'm coming in somewhere, I'm like, I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm going to try not to think.
Mm,
I'm just going to do it your way. I'm going to let you think for me, and I'll set myself a time frame. Sometimes that's 3 months, sometimes that's 2 weeks, sometimes, you know, it's going to vary depending on the thing. But I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do it your way. I'm not going to think. I'm just going to work, and I'm going to work my ass off, and I'm going to work how you tell me to. And then in 2 weeks, I'll pick my head up and ask some questions. But if you're trying to dissect everything day in and day out, you're going to be nothing but confused.
that's really good because people do, I mean, people drive themselves crazy trying to come up, reinventing the wheel, trying to come up with extra questions that they could magically ask or insert words or take things out. And it's like, why?
Yeah,
Right?
you have to get good at the principles and then get good at the structure and then get good at the questions within the structure. Once you are good at all of that, then you work on the what I call the soft skills, which is like, you know, controlling your tone.
Hmm.
Like if you don't even know the structure and you're trying to work on your tone, like
Yeah.
congratulations, it's not going to do much good.
Right.
Uh, you know, I do think tone is very, very, very important, but like if you don't have a structure, and so I see a lot of people that start working on the soft skills first, and then they struggle. And it's like you can do all of the soft skills very well. You can have great tone, you can pace things really well. You might ask good clarifying questions, but if you
Hmm.
don't have the structure down,
Hmm.
and so I think it has to kind of go in order. And usually whoever is leading you has an order for a reason, and like just shut up and do it.
I'm going to ask you one last question because I want to know how you feel about this. When I'm selling, I pretty much know within 5 minutes of being in discovery how the conversation is going to end.
Yep.
And there's a lot we have to go over to get
Yep.
there. But you should know your structure, your script, your customer, and the types of questions to ask so well that you should be like, okay, here's my plan.
Yep.
Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to offer them. And then you hold back things along the way to continue to build more and more urgency and momentum. So you find that too, like 5 minutes in, you're like, oh, I know exactly how this is going to end.
Yeah, you should be three or four questions ahead of the prospect in the conversation.
Yes.
Like you should. I actually do an exercise with a lot of people that I coach where, like, if we're listening to recorded calls, I'll
Mhm.
pause it at
Yes.
like 20 seconds in. They don't even get a minute. It's like 20 seconds. I'll pause it and I'll say, okay, tell me about this person.
Yes.
Like, where do they live? What kind of job do they have? You know, are they retired? What kind of job do they do? How many kids do they have? You know, what kind of car do they drive? You know, what are their friendships like? Because you can get crazy good at that just from somebody saying hello.
Hmm.
And Coming back to what we were just saying, like if you know the structure really well, you're always going to be ahead in the conversation, and then you know what objections are going to come. You can pre-handle them, and I think that's why you have to do structure and questions first, because I see so many scripts that people will ask a question, they think it's a really good question. I'm like, man, you could answer that 20 different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, as I'm writing out a script, if I have a question that I feel like I could get more than three or four, like if there's a question where it's like there's more than three or four ways they can respond, I've got to reword that question. It's got to be more specific.
Yeah, because you're scripting them.
Yeah, you're building the buyer. You got to build the buyer. You got to show them the sales is a game of focus. Whatever they focus on will grow. And
Oh,
so if you just let them focus on whatever they want, they're going to focus on money, because money makes the world go round, and that's what we're concerned about in our everyday life, especially in the final expense demographic. And so you have to show them where to focus. And you
yes.
show them that by your questions. And if your questions are so open-ended that they can answer them however they want, they are choosing where to focus. And that usually leads to, I want to think about it.
So if this all feels super overwhelming to you, because it probably does to some people, either go invest in an NEPQ program, work with someone like Kayden over there to help coach you. I went through the NEPQ program, and so what my script and what I teach and how I coach is very based on that. Kayden is running, an insurance team on a small level, probably better than mine. And if you, if any of us are here to help you build that structure and find that confidence, it is far better. One of the reasons I don't share my script is because the script won't sell.
Yeah,
You
it's
sell.
you have to, it's like
It
handing
is.
somebody a toolbox and telling them to fix your transmission.
Yes. And so it's sort of like my script isn't going to help you sell anything. I need to teach you how to use it. And I feel very strongly about that.
Agreed.
So, well, thank you so much for being here, Kayden. It was nice to talk to you in virtual person and have you share some value to everyone who's watching. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, thanks for having me on.